right, everybody. Here we are, and this is a 2025 rookie mock draft. One quarterback with landing spots. And as you can see, I see you already looking down at the bottom of the screen for those landing spots, and you're looking at it and you're going, oh my God. How in the world did you arrive at some of these landing spots? And I will tell you, it might be I don't want to say dumbest thing I've ever done, but I went to PFF. I used their mock draft simulator, and I did 3 rounds. Now, did they do some wacky things like have Ashton Jeanty get drafted by the Colts in round 1? Yes, so I had to change that. He's now with the Broncos. Did they do a crazy thing and have Omarion Hampton be drafted by the Detroit Lions? Yes, so I had to change that. And then did the Detroit Lions turn around in round 2 and select Kaleb Johnson? Yes, they did, so I changed that. But for the most part, these are landing spots not chosen by me, but chosen by PFF. So we're going to use these to do a little mock draft here, and it's gonna be a lot different than a lot of the other mock drafts I've done, that we've done on the Dynasty Roundtable. Just forewarning. I mean, you can probably you probably guessed that already, but anyway, let me know what you think of this. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Comment below. I think the first pick has to be Ashton Jeanty still. If he winds up in round 1 with the Broncos, it's a little bit lower than he probably will go. But I still like this landing spot. I still like the draft capital. He's still, for me, the best rookie in this class, offensive rookie that is, in a class that's filled with really good running backs. So I won't spend too much time on Ashton Jeanty. We'll spend the bulk of this video talking about some of the more polarizing picks in this draft, and more importantly, the polarizing landing spots here. I think the second overall pick, if he gets drafted by Minnesota in round 1, has to be Omarion Hampton. And I get it. Tet McMillan would be tempting, being drafted by the Patriots, being paired up with Drake May. But with Kevin O'Connell in that offensive scheme, J.J. McCarthy's likely going to be the starting quarterback this year. If he's not ready, then Daniel Jones might be the bridge to that. Either way, I like Kevin O'Connell offenses. They're going to score points. The Vikings are going to be in the red zone. And for all those reasons and more, and the fact that Omarion Hampton was super productive in college, back-to-back seasons with over 20 receptions as well. So he's big, he's fast, he's physical, and he can catch passes out of the backfield. I'd think this would be a perfect marriage between player and system. I think the third pick in this draft has to be Tet McMillan. And if you've been watching this channel, you will know that Tet McMillan's been a prospect that I've liked. I don't necessarily know that I love Tet McMillan. There are some prospects in this draft that I love. Tet McMillan's not necessarily one of them. Does he do a lot of nice things? Yes, he does. I think he has elite hands. I think he can pluck the ball out of the air with those big mitts. I think his route running, especially in the short to intermediate area, is really good. I think he can use his body as, like similar to the way Mike Evans uses his body along the sidelines to make catches that most players can't make. I think he's a really good prospect. I do think he has some work to do. But this landing spot would signal to me that, top 5 draft capital, pair with the young quarterback that we really like, albeit Drake May is going to run around a decent amount, which is good for fantasy, but might be frustrating for production on the wide receiver front. But there's going to be hardly any target competition there for him right from the jump, so he's going to have every opportunity to succeed, assuming he winds up, or if, I shouldn't say assuming, if he winds up with the Patriots. All right, so that leads us to pick number 4, and there's a lot of different options directions we could go. I mean, the obvious landing spot that to me sticks out like a sore thumb in round 2, Cam Skattebo being drafted ahead of Kaleb Johnson, ahead of TreVeyon Henderson, ahead of Quinshon Judkins to the Cowboys. I think that if that happens, you would absolutely have a league mate of yours take Cam Skattebo in this range. Yes, ahead of Luther Burden, ahead of Emeka Egbuka. Now, should you do that? No, you shouldn't do that. Not Emeka Egbuka, but Luther Burden's going to be the pick here. If he winds up in Dallas with Dak Prescott on a team that's probably not going to have a very good defense, on a team that's honestly probably not going to be very good, but playing in a lot of shootouts, it could be very fantasy friendly. And we haven't dug into the Brian Schottenheimer a ton and what his offensive play calling tendencies are. So we have some work to do in that regard, but once we get closer to redraft season, we'll dig more into that and really dive into these situations. But on the surface, the Cowboys, it looks like a great situation. I know he's paired up with CeeDee Lamb, so the target share might be limited, but Luther Burden's a player we like. Cowboys with Dak Prescott, good landing spot. And I'm not going to waste too much time. I do think Emeka Egbuka would be the next pick that we would make in this draft because the Falcons, outside of Drake London, Darnell Mooney served as their wide receiver 2 for a good portion of this year. McLeod, Ray McLeod, they used a decent amount as well. Kyle Pitts has disappointed to this point, so Egbuka would probably step in right away and be the number 2 option with Michael Penix. And from what we've seen from Michael Penix, I really like. I think he can spin it. I think he can get the ball out on time. I think he throws with anticipation. So Egbuka would be a nice weapon for them, a nice complement to a bigger wide receiver that plays on the outside in Drake London. Now it gets interesting. Because we are staring down the barrel of, a wide receiver. Many don't expect to be taken in round 1, but he's climbing up draft boards in Matthew Golden. There's a tight end, but I don't typically like to take tight ends this high. In Tyler Warren, although he's really good and winds up in a fantastic landing spot. Guys, I think, and let me know what you think in the comments of this pick, but if Cam Skattebo goes to the Cowboys in early round 2, I think this is where he's probably going to go. And this is probably where I feel comfortable taking him, to be honest with you. I don't know if, Kaleb Johnson would be tempting. I think Kaleb Johnson's a better player, but he's going to have to sit behind Derrick Henry for a year. Probably. So, again, let me know what you think of this in the comments. But when this pick was made by the PFF Mock Draft Simulator, I was stunned. I really was. And you can't take away anything from the year that Cam Skattebo had this season. It was incredible. But if he gets drafted in round 2, which I suppose could happen, look out. I mean, he's going to fly up these rookie drafts, especially in one quarterback. Now this gets, interesting because, Matthew Golden's there. I don't necessarily love that landing spot with the Packers in round 1. It feels like a congested situation with Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, Tucker Kraft. I think we probably need to go running back here, and this would be the point where I would take Kaleb Johnson. And maybe I should have taken Kaleb Johnson over Cam Skattebo. You can make that argument because I don't necessarily think the Ravens is a bad landing spot. I think if the Ravens take him in this range of the draft, they're probably thinking, oh my God, I cannot believe Kaleb Johnson's here. We have the perfect running back to maintain our style of play, which is a bruising, physical, run-the-ball style. We all know who the Ravens are with Lamar Jackson. this feels like a match made in heaven. You're going to have to wait a year, likely, because they have Derrick Henry there. But we all know Derrick Henry's on the wrong side of 30. Even Derrick Henry is going to lose his superpowers at some point. Maybe not. Maybe he'll never lose his superpowers. Maybe he'll play until he's 40. I don't know. But likely not. And Kaleb Johnson would be the heir apparent. I'm not saying he's Derrick Henry, but he has a very similar play style, which would appeal, I think, to the Ravens. And like I said, if the Ravens take him here, it's because, oh my God, I cannot believe Kaleb Johnson fell this far in the draft. This is, I mean, we have to make this pick. So the next pick I'm going to make is Dylan Sampson, because Dylan Sampson gets the landing spot of all landing spots with the Los Angeles Chargers. It's an interesting pick because I don't necessarily know if he fits the style of running back that Jim Harbaugh would want, but we aren't really worried about that right now. Assuming the Chargers pick him in round 2, it would signal to us that they have a plan for him. They're going to use him as such. He's going to be involved a fair amount. Now, he might have to battle J.K. Dobbins or Gus Edwards or whoever they decide to bring back, if they decide to bring anybody back. But Dylan Sampson, I think, was a really good college player. He produced when Jalen Wright was there in Tennessee. He's fast, he's slippery, he's elusive, he's a little bit undersized, but he can also catch the ball out of the backfield. I think this would be a really good fit for a player like Dylan Sampson. Now, he's probably going to be paired with like a J.K. Dobbins type, so he's probably never going to get that bell cow usage, but he is going to catch passes. So that's what we really are looking for. Now we have a real decision to make, because these landing spots, man, Matthew Golden's there. You know, we have Emeka Egbuka, Jack Beck in round 2, Kaleb Johnson and Dylan Sampson we just selected. Jaden Higgins is late in round 2. We have TreVeyon Henderson, Quinshon Judkins being selected. Decent landing spots with opportunity right away in round 3. But I do believe that we have to end the Travis Hunter slide right now. And there's a chance that, you could argue, well, Seth, you're the biggest Travis Hunter fan in the world. Why are you taking Dylan Sampson ahead of him? And Cam Skattebo, for that matter. Well, 1, because of the landing spot. 2, because of the landing spot as well. Like, landing spot for Sampson and Skattebo, but also bad landing spot for Travis Hunter, even though he gets top 5 draft capital in this situation. Malik Neighbors is there already. So I don't think, and I could be wrong, but I don't think the Giants would take their second wide receiver in the top 5 of the NFL draft. I would bet that they're probably going to play him primarily at cornerback if this happens. That's number 1. Number 2, as I've already mentioned, Malik Neighbors is already there, so even the opportunities that he would get in the offense, the target share likely wouldn't be what we wanted it to be on the snaps where he's playing offense. So while I love the player, I just really don't like this situation. And that leads us to the 10th pick, which I do think has to be Matthew Golden. Now, I don't like this situation either for Matthew Golden, but he's a player, to be honest, I haven't done all my homework on him yet, but I hear good things from what I've seen. He looks really good, and if he winds up with the Packers in round 1, I think this is where he would go. This is where he belongs. And I get it, it's congested there. They like to run the football. So, again, for all those reasons, I don't think it's the greatest landing spot in the world, but I cannot deny the draft capital would lead us in this direction. So we have selected all the running backs that have been selected in rounds 1 and 2, I believe. We have a tight end on the board still. All the quarterbacks are still on the board. We're not going to worry about quarterback because this is a 1 quarterback league, and frankly, I don't particularly like the quarterbacks in this draft class. But man, I love Quinshon Judkins, so that's the direction I'm gonna go. in here. I think Quinshon Judkins with the Patriots, Mike Vrabel, it's the perfect dog meet dog, like dog as a player meet dog as a coach setup. And I have to believe the Patriots are going to improve their offensive line. Again, the Patriots very quickly could turn this thing around with Vrabel. And McDaniels is likely going to be there for a long time as the offensive coordinator because we know he's not going to get another bite at the coaching apple. So for all those reasons and more, I think Quinshon Judkins is the pick. Yes, over Tyler Warren, a first-round tight end, over some of the second-round wide receivers as well, and over the quarterbacks, of course. And I do think that with the 12th pick, we're going to stick with the theme here and go TreVeyon Henderson because I do like this landing. There's going to be a lot of opportunity right away. And you didn't see how the full draft played out, but in this scenario, I would assume the Raiders would get a veteran quarterback because they didn't take one in the draft. So I like this landing spot with the Patriots. Pete Carroll likely going to want to run the football. And if he takes TreVeyon Henderson, it would signal that TreVeyon Henderson's going to be the guy. He's going to be a focal point in the offense. So that's round one. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. And I don't, just to comment on this real briefly, I don't know how, like these landing spots, I do think there would be more running backs selected. If these were all the running backs that were selected in days 1 and 2, I would be disappointed. I think the class is better than that. But, I mean, we have so many tight ends selected in round 3, which we'll get into here in round 2. But I do think the first pick of round 2 has to be Tyler Warren. I mean, Tyler Warren going to the Bengals is a home run landing spot for a tight end with Joe Burrow. We're not really sure what's going to happen with T. Higgins right now. I know Joe Burrow's doing everything in his power, it seems, to get T. Higgins to sign, or to get the Bengals to sign T. Higgins to an extension. But nevertheless, like, this is, I think, a great landing spot for him. And he's my tight end 1 in the class right now. So, again, you can make an argument. I don't agree with it, that he should be selected towards the back half of the first round. Getting him in the second round, I think, is about where he belongs here. So, again, now we have a lot of options here at the beginning of round 2. We could look at one of these wide receivers in round 2. We could also go tight end. Man, there's Savion Williams is interesting. I don't necessarily love the landing spot, though. I do think we probably just keep going. I think the tight end has to be the pick here in Loveland because it's not as good of a situation in Jacksonville, but I cannot deny that with Trevor Lawrence, Liam Cohen, I know Duval, we've overreacted to opening press conferences before. I'm not going to do that again. Liam Cohen was very impressive as the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay. Say what you want about the Khans, Tony Khan's, say what you want about him in AEW. They don't have the greatest track record, and they probably don't deserve our trust, but I actually thought that was a decent hire. Now, the process of getting to that hire was an absolute train wreck, but if they take Colston Loveland, I mean, I know Evan Ingram, I'd have to go look at Evan Ingram's contract. Now, Evan Ingram is under contract for another year, but he's going to be 31 years old in 2025. If they cut him, it would be $13.5 million of dead cap money. So Evan Ingram's going to be on this roster, but this is more of a pick for the long term. I like Loveland. I don't love him as a prospect. So let's move on. Now, just looking at my options here, I'm kind of overwhelmed by this. All of these options. Now they're all decently in the same spot, right? But if Xavier Restrepo gets drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals, I think that that would be a signal that maybe they moved on from T. Higgins. I think that this would be a nice player for Joe Burrow to have in his arsenal. I mean, if they decide to keep T. Higgins, Xavier Restrepo, Andre Yoshivas, they selected Tyler Warren in round 1, and they have Chase Brown there at running back. Those would be a lot of good offensive options. I would hope that maybe they would, look to the offensive line or maybe the defense. I don't know with some of these picks, but in this situation, they're going all in on the offense. So there, and did they? No, they didn't. I thought maybe they took another wide receiver in round 3, but they didn't. So now I think it's interesting because the Patriots selected Quinshon Judkins round 3, Jack Beck, the hero of the Senior Bowl, in round 2. I think him paired with Drake May would be the direction I would go at the 204. He's a player that I really like. So again, we're going with the draft capital. We're sticking with the draft capital lane. And I made a mistake here. There's one player in round 3 that sticks out like a sore thumb, and he's not a tight end. He's a wide receiver, and that's Trey Harris, who was selected by the Packers in round 3, pick 87. He's somebody that's been pretty consistently mocked in the first round, the late first round, especially in 1QB. But I cannot deny that that is a really bad landing spot for him, especially considering the Packers also select Matthew Golden in round 1. So that landing spot would absolutely tank his value. I think Elikai Manor has to be the next pick here. I know the Raiders in this scenario, their quarterback situation is kind of up in the air, but I like the player. I really do. I like the situation. I mean, there's not much target competition there. I mean, Jacoby Myers is there, Brock Bowers is there, but at wide receiver, there should be some opportunities for him right away. And then we probably should consider some of these round 3 tight ends, maybe some of these wide receivers in round 3. But I'm going to go Jaden Higgins with this next selection. And you could go quarterback here, especially if Cam Ward gets taken number 1 overall. But I don't think either of these quarterbacks really do it for me from a fantasy perspective. I don't think they're going to run around a ton, which means that they're going to have to do it with their arm, and I don't necessarily think that they're going to be able to do that in year 1. I think really, if anything, you're probably going to be able to – there's going to be an opportunity if you like these guys to – to buy low later on. So I think I am going to go ahead and go the Trey Harris route right now. Trey Harris, if he makes it this far, even though the landing spot isn't what we want at all, still would signal to me that there might be an opportunity for him there. Now, you could definitely argue maybe we should go tight end. There are some tight ends with really good landing spots in round 3. But I think Trey Harris, the upside of him, even though Matthew Golden was selected over him by the Packers, I think would be really, really solid. And now, there's a lot of receivers there. Do we go the running back route? even though it's a day 3 running back. I'm not crazy about that idea. So I think probably, Savion Williams is still sitting there in round 2. I'm very torn here. And this is probably the part of the draft where I would maybe look to trade these picks for some veterans. I don't know, but I think, and this maybe I'm a little nuts, but I think Harold Fannin Jr., I know he's selected here by the Rams. I really like that landing spot for him, even though it's late round 3. I think he's he's my tight end 3 right now. Warren, Loveland, and Fannin are my 1, 2, 3. I know Arroyo had a really good Senior Bowl. I've heard good things about Gunnar Helm and Mason Taylor as well. Mason Taylor had a pretty good Senior Bowl as well, I understand. But Fannin Jr., if the Rams select him, man, that would be exciting to me. And at this point, I suppose, you could think about selecting a quarterback, but I'm going to go Tej Johnson, because Tej Johnson is another player who had a really good Senior Bowl. Very, very slight player, very similar in stature to maybe a Tank Dell, but really, really good feet, really good route runner. And he winds up here to the Steelers, who, George Pickens has had every opportunity to just claim the alpha spot on that team. And to this point, he hasn't done it yet. And he's, like I said, he's had 3 years. And I'm going by the fantasy points, not necessarily the target share or the opportunity. Going by the production. And for fantasy, George Pickens has mostly disappointed us. And if Tej Johnson winds up there, I could see him having a very similar role to maybe a Deontay Johnson type player. So I could see the Steelers really utilizing him well. And it looks like the Steelers are probably going to bring back either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. So, I mean, it's not fantastic, but it's not horrible either. So, there are some tight ends we could take. Man, Mason Taylor to the Chargers looks good. Isaiah Bond to the Commanders is risky, but that has a ton of upside. Jalen Broyles to the Saints would be a nice selection as well. I think we're going to go Mason Taylor with the Chargers. That landing spot is just too good. And then we're going to cap the draft off with the wide receivers in Jalen Royals and then Isaiah Bond, because those 2 landing spots, and honestly, if you wanted to make an argument, well, I like the Commanders landing spot a little bit better than the Saints landing spot, I wouldn't necessarily hate it. If you wanted to say, hey, I like Elijah Arroyo to the Seahawks, I don't necessarily love that scenario because you got DK Metcalf there, JSN there, you have Geno Smith, who I'm not a huge fan of. So you can make those arguments, I suppose. But really, the late second round, getting into the third round, it's really go get your guy season. And then, you could really also consider some running backs who were not taken, surprisingly, in this draft, like a Devin Neal. He could be somebody that you could look at in this range. I would have no problem with that. You could look at a Brashard Smith type who also had a really good Senior Bowl. I would have no issue with that either. So there's a ton of options in the late second, third round, especially single quarterback, most definitely in Superflex. And as you see here, no quarterbacks were selected because I'm not a fan, especially from a fantasy perspective. Jackson Dart was not taken. But Dylan Gabriel and Jalen Milroe were selected in round 3. Some of the other players that we didn't take in this mock draft, I guess Gunnar Helm. We kind of talked about Elijah Arroyo already, but most of the other players we selected, and I don't think I missed anybody of note. Savion Williams, I guess, although to be honest with you, yeah, you could make an argument for Savion Williams, but I do think that that wide receiver room is a bit crowded. So yeah, I don't know. That just feels like a strange one. I guess Savion Williams I missed. You could say that, but let me know what you think in the comments. Should Savion Williams have gone ahead of Royals or Bond? I to be honest, I kind of forgot about Savion Williams, but nevertheless, that is the rookie mock draft. Let me know what you think. Like, subscribe. Until next time, be good, everybody, and we will see you in the next one.